After the incident at my house, the cops helped me get a room at a hotel nearby my school. Naturally, I was afraid to be alone in my house after the break-in. Despite my lack of sleep, I chose to attend the first day of school. Fortunately, I was able to keep my mind off the incident most of the time. I didn't bring it up with any of my friends either. Afterwards, I returned to the hotel, spending most of the time on my laptop, which I snagged before leaving the house. My parents arrived early the next morning. They showed up at the hotel around 7:45. Apparently they'd stopped by the house first to drop off their luggage. We sat together at a small table, sharing a box of donuts they picked up on their way over to me. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't happy to see them. They were definitely my parents this time. There was still a stiffness to their behavior, but they seemed to be better put together than a month ago. It was a brief visit before I had to rush off to school. They offered to let me have the day off, but I suggested taking tomorrow off instead. A 3-day weekend would be a nice way to kick off a new school year. Although that wasn't the only reason I decided to go to school that day. I felt reasonably calm until I thought about returning home. I knew that it would be hard for me to get my mind off of what had happened in the kitchen. Once school was out, I headed out to where my parents normally picked me up. Aside from some brief chat about how my day went, it was a fairly quiet drive. I sat in the back, staring out the window. I could feel it. The tension was building in my chest the closer we got to my house, even though I'd lived there my whole life. I did my best not to let it show. I kept my head down and stayed close to my parents as we entered the front door. Instinctively, I headed up to my bedroom, as I'd usually done in the past couple of years. I said I was going to get some homework done, though I actually hardly had any. It was nice to no longer be alone in the house, but I enjoyed spending most of my time in a quiet place. 11 at night and I was exhausted. It was strange to feel so tired before midnight, but I would have to get used to it again for school anyway. While lying in bed, I drifted off into another half-sleep. I could feel myself lying there, but all around me were tall trees. I was in a forest, and it felt familiar. A few seconds later, my calm diminished. I've been here before. Part of me knew it was just a dream, but I felt like I was in two places at once. I found myself running. I didn't think I was being chased, but rather I was looking for someone. It didn't take me long to notice a tent up ahead. I headed towards it at a steady pace. As I ran, though, I noticed a grayish silhouette appeared near the tent. The closer I came to it, the more the silhouette changed. I recognized the long brown hair and the clothing. I continued to run towards her until something suddenly tripped me up. I woke up suddenly with a jerk in my right leg. It was 1:15 in the morning. There was no way I had been asleep for 2 hours. I got up and took a closer look at the clock. If this were a dream, the time would change on the clock inexplicably. I turned to my door for a moment and then back to the clock. It was still 1:15. Perhaps my mind was still partially asleep, but I had the sudden suspicion someone was standing outside my door. I switched on the light and looked around my room. My closet doors were closed as usual, and my room was mostly clean. I'd taken some time to throw some clothes in the laundry earlier. Quickly, my attention returned to my bedroom door. The feeling was growing. I reassured myself I was probably still experiencing some mild trauma from the incident a couple of nights ago. My parents were home now, and I could call out to them if I needed to. I listened carefully but heard no movement. Contradicting my paranoia, I unlocked the door and pulled it open. I was met with a dark hallway. The feeling remained, but I could see for myself my fears were a phantom of the mind. I noticed the door across the hall. Closed as always. Earlier that day I hadn't given it a single thought. It was nice to realize it was possible to pass by Janessa's door without immediately reminding myself that she was gone. I slipped on some house shoes and stepped out into the hallway. The door to my parents' bedroom was shut with the light off. Part of me was surprised that they were in bed after just having arrived back from Italy. I wasn't alone anymore, I reminded myself. I was in the company of people with whom I felt at least a little bit of trust. After school, I'd spent the whole rest of the day at home with them and nothing strange happened. It was dark downstairs. I stopped at the foot of the staircase. There was a strong urge, insisting that I could calm my nerves by heading down for a little while. I felt perfectly wide awake anyway. Taking the first step, I found myself hesitant. What was I trying to prove to myself? I just shook off the doubt and headed the rest of the way down. I flipped on the light in the living room. The curtains were closed and it was hot down there. We usually didn't keep the AC on downstairs once we were in bed. Though right now, I wish we had. It was unlikely I'd be down there for long, so I decided to endure it. I paced a bit, examining the walls as well as the television. What the hell is that? I stopped and took a step back. In the reflection of the television, I thought I saw something standing in the hallway. I was reminded of the dream that I had 5 minutes ago. I couldn't quite picture the big forest, but I could remember a big tent and... An image flashed before me. I shuddered when I saw her lying there on the warm forest ground. Just then, I heard what sounded like a whisper coming from the kitchen. I turned and headed towards it, against my better judgment. Something kept telling me that I was somehow confronting my fears by heading over. The kitchen. A pressure built in my chest as I stared at the kitchen table. I'd eaten there that evening with my parents. My real parents. They noticed I seemed timid while sitting there with them, eating much slower than usual. I went with my old standby and claimed that I was just tired. It wasn't entirely a lie, but fear was my true companion during dinner. The seats were clean and the garden door was closed. What intimidated me the most at the moment was that the curtains were open. I couldn't see anything past the pitch black just beyond the window pane. Last time I looked out there at night, I'd seen a gray silhouette. I felt a growing presence around me, but I didn't see anything. I brushed off one of the seats unnecessarily before sitting down. I felt like I was in a dentist's waiting room waiting for a painful surgery. I was scared, but I felt like I needed to sit with it. I kept my gaze on the table, moving my left index finger in a circle. Something was waiting for me down here, I thought to myself. Reluctantly, I looked up at the garden door. Nothing. I saw nothing, but I felt something. It had to be fear. It made perfect sense that I'd feel shaken up after 2 strange people broke into my house.
It's sleeping.
I couldn't move. I heard a familiar voice whisper as though her lips were mere inches from my ear. I choked on my own breath for a couple of seconds, shutting my eyes tightly. Scream, I told myself. My parents were right upstairs. Call to them. Call to them. No. Something told me to accept the voice. What's sleeping? I made fists to minimize the trembling in my hands. Was I really hearing a voice? Why didn't I just end this and rush back upstairs?
I don't know what it is either,
she replied. I can't remember anything, I admitted in a very shaky voice. Red silhouette. I couldn't take my eyes off of what had just appeared beyond the garden door. It was a tall figure, perhaps 7 or 8 feet. Though sitting, I almost lost my balance. I had to hold on to the table.
It can't hurt you.
Is this the thing that killed you? I was surprised at how calmly I was able to ask the question.
No.
Her voice was soothing, as though at peace with her situation.
You're remembering, that's all.
I sat up. I knew she was telling me the truth. I approached the door, each step weighed down by cement blocks. The red silhouette didn't react. I felt like it was staring at me despite lacking a face. Was it human? It had a human shape, but seemed skinnier than a regular person. Show yourself! There was a quivering in my chin as I spoke, the terror diluted by anger. My fists still trembled as I refused to back down. The figure merely stood there. We stared at one another for what felt like a minute before I felt something on my left hand. It felt like another hand. It was soft, delicate, and slightly smaller than mine. I clutched it, holding it firmly in my own.
It's just a shadow of a memory.
I couldn't see her, but I felt her right next to me. The silhouette appeared smoky, its shape losing the human element. I nodded, acknowledging my sister. With my right hand, I reached for the lock on the garden door. It can't hurt me, I reassured myself. As I unlocked it, the smoky figure became increasingly distorted. I don't know what you are. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to say, but I wanted to sound firm. I was starting to finally remember more about what happened the day Janessa died. The memories felt surreal, but I knew it was the truth. I know you're dangerous, but you're not immortal. I could feel a hatred from what had become little more than a large cloud of red smoke. I held the invisible hand on my left tighter as I used my right to push down the door handle. I hate you too! I hate you so much that I can't wait to see you again. Because I'm going to kill you, even if I die right after. Next time, I will fight back. I'm not going to watch from another tree. Oh, God! I remembered now. I was hiding up in a tree, clinging for dear life that day. I don't know how many hours I spent up there. I'd completely forgotten about that part until just now. I was about to open the garden door when the smoky figure suddenly shifted. I almost lost my grip when my parents appeared in its place. No, they weren't my parents. They were those imposters I met a couple of mornings ago. But I realize now that they too could not hurt me. Like the red smoky silhouette from before, there was an intense hatred radiating from them. In spite of it, I grimaced at the blank staring pair and opened the door. There was nothing there. As I opened the door, I saw little more than the backyard I'd always known. It was illuminated slightly by the moon, stars, and some street lamps off in the distance. I felt the soft hand I'd been holding slip away, her presence vanishing. I blacked out until I felt a different hand shaking me on the shoulder.
Jeremy, what are you doing down here?
My mother was standing right in front of me. I flinched at first before realizing where I was. Apparently I'd fallen asleep on the couch at some point after closing the garden door. It was daytime now, though probably still quite early. I came down last night to watch some TV.
Are you sure you're doing alright?
The concern in her eyes reminded me of Officer Reynolds. Yeah, I'm fine. I actually feel pretty well rested. My mom walked into the kitchen, offering me a drink. I lifted myself off of the couch, feeling something just as I got up. It didn't scare me this time. There were a couple of dry, crunchy leaves, which had been lying under me. That wasn't all, though. Stuffed somewhat into the couch cushions was a flower. Pulling it out, I saw that it was an orange tulip. I rolled the stem between my left thumb and index finger for a moment.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I'll just have a glass of milk. I thought about what happened last night. I no longer had any fear. I didn't think I could handle remembering what happened that day out in the forest. Instead, I felt some peace finally embracing those memories. I remembered the thing I had seen that day. I remember what it did to my sister. I also knew that Officer Reynolds was one of the cops who arrived at the scene later that day. It was all coming back to me. I slipped the tulip into my left pajama pocket and headed into the kitchen. I had the feeling Janessa wanted me to move on for now. I was still just a weak teenager. I still don't quite know what that thing was that killed her, but I knew I would have to transform myself if I ever had any sort of chance of taking it down.